So what that essentially means, and this is exactly what Piaget observed, is that when you put people together, which you do, because people can't live by themselves, we're highly social creatures, we have a long period of dependence, we have to make our way in, you know, the nuclear family unit, whatever it happens to be, then we have to adjust to the broader group. We have to be acceptable to the broader group, and then we have to learn to maintain the broader group and to contribute to it. Because if we don't, the quality of our experience will suffer dramatically. So you end up outcast or punished or frustrated or disappointed or alone, or all the things that happen if you don't at least uphold a fair bit of your social responsibility. And so what that means right away is that the patterns that constitute appropriate behavior are not just arbitrary. Now, what exactly they are, well, that's complicated. You know, it's just as complicated as Jane Goodall going out into the habitat of the chimps and watching them and trying to figure out just exactly what those chimps are up to. And we kind of know what they're up to. They organize themselves in dominance hierarchies, because almost every animal does that. And then along with that go certain kinds of rules of interaction, except they're not rules, because chimps don't have rules, because chimps don't have abstract conception. What they have is rituals of behavior and shared expectations. But that's the beginning of rules, right? It's like Piaget says, well, if you put children together when they're 7 or 8 and they play marbles, they can all play. But if you take them away from the group and you ask them what the rules are, they really don't know. And all that means is they can dance, and they can dance with other kids, but they can't tell you how to dance. But that doesn't mean they don't know how to do it. And like, we're all like that, right? Because we're living in these very, very complex hierarchical environments where we inhabit multiple hierarchies, and they're very, very complicated. And we're always wandering around trying to figure out, well, what the hell is it that we're up to? And we don't exactly know, which is why we need the psychology. But just because we don't know what we're up to doesn't mean we're not up to something. And it also doesn't mean that there isn't something that we should be up to. And I think the social interactionist idea is even deeper than that, because almost all the time when you're interacting with people, they're broadcasting their desire for you to be some sort of person, right? And it might be kind of like the person you are, but their expectations are higher than that, because they would rather, especially when they're seriously involved with you, they would rather that you were a good sort of person. And that's what they demand from you. They want you to listen to them. They want you to treat them properly. They want you to engage in reciprocal trade. They want you to take care of yourself. I'm assuming they're not all resentful and full of hate and all that. You know, they're not just saying, be yourself. They're saying, no, no, no. Be what everyone needs. And that's what everyone is broadcasting to everyone else all the time. It's like, be what I need, be what I need, be what I need, be what they need. And so you're always being told a message from people, even if they're just raising their eyebrows at you, or smiling or not smiling, or calling you on the phone or texting you, or not doing that. You're just being informed about who you should be all the time. And there's no reason to assume that's arbitrary either, given that we share a common biological ground, and we have the same emotions, roughly speaking, and we have the same motivations, roughly speaking. So given that pattern, that ground of commonality and expectation, well, why should we assume anything other than a patterned emergence of agreement out of that? So the moral relativist theory assumes that morality is relative, and I think that's a naive theory. It seems to me that it's relative and non-relative, which means there are elements of it that are fixed and necessarily so, and then there are other things that can vary without a problem, as long as people agree to it. But I think that societies, and this is also a Piagetian notion, that societies that violate the principle of reciprocity are not very stable, because no one's pleased by those circumstances. Some people are slaves and some people are tyrants, and that'll work for a while, but it's unstable. And even within a family, it's the same thing. If your father's a complete bloody tyrant, what you're going to do is either be crushed and useless, or get the hell away from there as fast as you can. It's not a stable solution. So, and you know, non-reciprocal relations at any level of interaction are not, they're not tenable, and they shouldn't be tenable. You know, so when you see people in psychotherapy, especially if they tend to be on the agreeable side, one of the things that you teach them is how to speak more about their own needs, so to speak, or their own desires or their own values, so that the probability that they'll engage in a truly reciprocal relationship starts to increase. They won't be taken advantage of so much. And that seems to be a necessary precondition for their satisfactory embeddedness in a social context. Satisfactory being something that you are doing and that you can maintain and are willing to maintain, right? Because a real relationship is a game you play over and over and over and over. And you're not going to want to play with someone who doesn't play fair. So even little kids know that, and they know it deeply. So the moral relativism theory is foolish, and it's foolish and ill-researched. At the bottom of the being and becoming question is something else, and this is something that the existential philosophers and the Jungians and most religious systems concentrate on, which is sort of, well, what's the core nature of being? And when systems of that sort are discussing the core nature of being, one of the immediate objects of contemplation is the fact that human beings are limited, right? There's lots of things we can't do. For example, you're there and you're not there. You know, then that's thrownness from a phenomenological perspective. You're just stuck with what you are. You know, you're a certain height, you have certain eye color, you're a certain amount of attractive or not. You know, you're verbally fluent, you're smart or you're not, or you're conscientious. And it's just sort of, those are the cards that you've been dealt. And it really is worth thinking about it that way, because who you are in some sense is a consequence of a lot of processes, genetic processes, that are in some ways random. And you've been dealt a particular hand, and then you have to play it. And that hand has limitations. And so people in some sense they're offered opportunities by the nature of how they're constituted, but there's also a tragic element to that, which is, well, as you move in life, you bump up against limitations that you cannot transcend. You know, and those are the typical limitations. You bump up against the demands of the social group, which has a tyrannical element. You bump up against nature itself, because you're susceptible to illness and to degeneration and eventually to death, and so are the people around you. And so there's this issue at the bottom of being that also presents you with a problem. So life is problematic, you're trying to solve it, and that's what you're stuck with. So that's sort of the parameters of being.